the unique thing about Milwaukee. We talk a lot about this, the small walkie, that concept that goes throughout all of tourism. And I think it's so apparent in the craft beer industry because behind the scenes, we don't see it as the customers, but breweries are doing so much unique things when it comes to barring equipment, barring hops. You're
Interesting.
You're grabbing that. So that's behind the scenes. But then in the front, you have things like this co-op, this syndicate. I mentioned the Lincoln Park warehouse, and that's something I definitely want to do a kind of more in-depth study on. That specific building in Bayview. Right now, you have 2 different breweries in there. The Eagle Park has been in there before. I think Company has been in there. You have this one space that somehow has been able to transform breweries and kind of build the next stepping stone. That's a unique way, I think, to drive people to area when you have a couple in one area, in one building in this case.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Over a Pint. I'm your host, Pat McGovern. I am pumped up because today on Over a Pint, we're talking beer. We're talking beer with Margaret from the Business Journal, and I am psyched about this episode. Guys, I got to tell you, you know what's cool about talking to journalists is just the perspective they give on the business, right? I mean, they understand it. And they come at it with a different lens. So I am so excited to get into this today. Margaret, say hello to the crew. Welcome aboard.
Hello, so happy to join you guys. And yeah, what better name for a topic with the podcast show that we've got? So I love it. Excited to talk beer. What better way to talk about Milwaukee business than the beer industry?
Welcome.
Margaret, why don't you start, if you don't mind? Why don't you start, Margaret, by telling us a little bit about you and your beat that you cover? Because we were just going over this a little bit before the show, and you got a lot on your plate. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I joke I have the beats that are all things Milwaukee, so I'm very lucky there. I've been with the Business Journal now since August of 2019. Hard to believe that pretty much all of my time has been what we're doing right now, talking on a Teams call, Zoom calls. We've been remote for a long time now, but hopefully getting back in the office soon. But so I cover a couple different things. I started off in manufacturing and tourism. So Summerfest, State Fair, and all those great things that make Milwaukee unique. And with manufacturing came the beer beat. So I got started there, kind of took it to a new level. We get a weekly beer blog with the Milwaukee Business Journal. We are all about shifting beats at the Business Journal. So I did my manufacturing beat. My lovely colleague Rich Kirchen, he covers that now. I moved on to nonprofits and arts. But I got to keep the beer beat. So I was very excited about that, and Molson Coors and all the great craft brewers we have here in the city. And then I just recently got the sports business beat as well. So Bucks, Brewers, and everything in between. So I joke, all things Milwaukee. It's been a great time learning about the different parts of the industries.
Very cool.
That's super interesting. We'll have to have you back, Margaret, to talk about tourism. Both us at Acedia and Celtic, we handle a lot of tourism accounts, so that would be another interesting topic. But the topic for today, guys, is beer. And Margaret, why don't we start here? Why don't you give us, if you wouldn't mind, give us the lay of the land of, the beer business in Milwaukee. Maybe you start before the pandemic, during, and now what you see coming out of it.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely have kind of 3 different segments as we look at pre, post, pre, during, and yeah, this kind of post question mark. I always like to say we're not quite out of it, but gosh, we've gotten a lot of recovery over the last couple of months, so we're seeing some very good signs. But yeah, pre-pandemic, I mean, Milwaukee, as probably a lot of us know, has such a rich brewing history. Past, certainly, even if they have kind of left town, as it were, is still prevalent throughout the city. You have Miller Brewing and the great work being done in Miller Valley with Molson Coors. But particularly pre-pandemic, the thing I was watching most was the craft scene. And it's been so interesting. Milwaukee, despite our wonderful history with beer, kind of lagged behind in the craft brewing scene. You had Denver, you had Chicago, you had some of these bigger cities that you saw an influx of craft brewers, kind of these neighborhood craft brewing pockets. But Milwaukee, we had a few. Lakefront certainly being a big name, Sprecher being a big name that we all know and love here in Milwaukee, but not as many smaller, those kind of neighborhood breweries that you go to, walk down the street, grab a pint, as it were. But that started to change around 2017. We really started seeing the first couple big craft brewers pick up, and it was away from there. You had Eagle Park, you had Third Space Brewing, a lot of those names that again now we see on store shelves, whether we're going to Pick and Save, discount liquor, and from there it's taken off. So right before the pandemic, I was watching, where are the next pockets, where are the next neighborhood pockets that we might see more breweries coming up in. And I will say, as we kind of go through these three different segments, pre, during, and post pandemic, it's still the case. Breweries are still coming up despite the many challenges with COVID. But you have neighborhoods like Bayview. Here, I live in Wauwatosa here, and we see quite a few popping up on North Avenue. That it's becoming not necessarily the Third Spaces of the world that you're going to see on all store shelves, but these these very localized breweries. And as we tie that back into tourism, that creates a kind of new incentive for people to come to Bayview, to come to Wauwatosa. Yeah. It's not just about, if I'm going to Bayview, I'm not just going to 1840 over on Kinnickinnick. I might take a swing over to one of the other breweries there. I might go into the Lincoln Park warehouse where there's a couple different breweries located in, and I'll take a step over at the distillery. It's creating this tourism ecosphere, as it were. So that was the pre. And certainly, if we want to talk trends, there was a lot of trends with hard seltzer, with the fruited beers, the overly fruited beers, sometimes didn't even taste like beer. Then you got into the pandemic, and all hell broke loose, as it were. Certainly Milwaukee, we had our safer at home order, which really caused breweries to shift their focus. Some of them may have been doing that, they may have been on store shelves and really just ramp up distribution a lot more. But others had to pivot. It's the buzzword I hate at this point. But it's pretty accurate. They had to pivot to figure out, how are you going to get beer into customers' hands when maybe I don't have that strong distribution network quite yet. Maybe I want just the corner brewery that everyone Joe Schmo stopped in on a Wednesday night, played some trivia, and had a beer that I wasn't going out and selling. So you had certain ones were huge players. Eagle Park, I know I had their beers quite often pre-pandemic in the East Side brewery tap room, and they did some in store, not much. The pandemic, they went full force. They're now throughout pretty much all of Wisconsin. They got their second brewery location up in Muskego. I encourage people to check that out if you haven't. It's a gorgeous facility. So they went from, we're just going to be that taproom only distribution, to starting off with curbside pickup, the thing we're all familiar with now, to getting into the discount liquors of the world, to now you can find at Total Wine. So they certainly were a really good success story there. And then others, went to the crowlers and the growlers method, and certainly are still doing that today. But probably the most exciting is this time we're in now, because finally we're seeing these, a glimmer of normalcy. Tap rooms, for the most part, have pretty much all opened up to some level. Certainly, we see all the social distancing, we see the plexiglass. Everyone kind of has their different safety procedures to make it a safe experience. I know I was super excited to see some of the even COVID-19 vaccine tie-ins when it comes to brewing. Yeah. I went to Black Husky. You show your vaccine card, you get your free beer, but also they've done a great job of putting up the plexiglass, making it feel safe, and I think as we kind of continue, we're in April now. Finally, hopefully, knock on wood, no more snow. We're gonna get the nice weather. We're gonna get more of that outdoor patio space, and I think people, not even just in this recovery period, but hopefully a couple of years down the line, are really going to take advantage of that outdoor dining that we've seen. That's just the general overview, but we could talk
great overview
aspects to the beer industry.
Yeah, that's a fantastic overview. Thank you for that, Margaret. I got to tell you, you answered a burning question that I have, and I always talk to Kurt about it, is how on earth can Milwaukee support all of these breweries? And I think your response was great, as kind of know who you are. And some of them are perfectly happy being a neighborhood bar or, you know, or distiller, whatever that may end up being, where it's like, we're not looking for mass distribution. We just want to build community in and around our tasting room. And I think that means that there's room for people. You know, if everybody was battling after the big dogs, it might be challenging, but I think knowing who you are and keeping it local has probably saved a lot of people.
Oh, most definitely. And it's so interesting. You see a lot more of these passion project breweries. And I think that's a great way to describe it. And actually one of the brewers I talked to, Radix Fermentation, that's what they said. They said it's a passion project. We're not looking to be the lakefronts.
Yeah.
They just had this desire to showcase, of all things, we'll get technical, beer, spontaneous fermentation, which is taking the particles in the air and certain seasons of the year, especially in Wisconsin when we have 4 seasons in one day, but picking those days where the humidity is just right and using that to create some amazing sours and amazing ales. But they're doing this. The owners of Radix are also working full-time at Mobcraft. So talk about collaboration within the beer industry and talk about this willingness. Certainly, you know, they could be competitors. Mobcraft does their own sour program, but instead, owners at Mobcraft are letting some of their own full-time employees kind of launch their own endeavors at the same time. It's incredible, the Milwaukee craft beer community.
Wow. You know, it's funny, Margaret, you were saying earlier about Black Husky. We were just talking about that before you jumped on, and yeah, that's kind of cool. I'm sold when there's a brewery that's going to reward me, and I can come in and show my card and get a beer. I think that's awesome. You know, to kind of piggyback Brian's question, you know, you're right, Brian. We do talk about this all the time. It's like, my goodness, we've got breweries. I look left, right, up, down, everywhere. You know, the pie is only so big. But, you know, Margaret, as you're talking through this a little bit, I would imagine it's probably just simple economics. It's competitive. It's like with so many breweries in a town called the Brew City, you better be on your game. I mean, you better be putting out a great product, because I would imagine it's like, I know for me, if I go in and I have a bad beer or a bad experience, I should say, because part of this is experience too. Yeah. I'm going somewhere else because I've got a lot of choices. I'd imagine maybe this has helped the overall cause, because now everyone's got to be just so much better and good. What are you seeing with that?
So yeah, you're right. You have to be on top of your game. And I think this is where the idea of finding your niche, finding what is your passion project is so crucial. But also that's where I think the neighborhood concept is something where maybe another 2-3 years down the line, we're really going to be talking about, because I still don't think it's quite a surplus of the breweries itself. It might become a surplus of which area you go to. Because, for example, like I said, I'm here in Wauwatosa, living by North Avenue. If I pick a Saturday and it's a gorgeous Saturday, I stop over maybe at a Fermentorium, and then I go up to Stockhouse Brewing, and I make a day of it. You know, I hop from one to the other. So maybe I'm not just sitting in one brewery and trying all their beers. I'm gonna explore the neighborhood a bit. But then it's gonna become, well, why do I want to stay in Tosa versus go up to Bayview versus to go over to Walker's Point? So I think that's where you're really going to start seeing the competition when we look on that neighborhood aspect. Certainly when it comes to the bigger players in the state, I'm thinking Third Space, Lakefront, Eagle Park is kind of getting there with their distribution. Those guys, they have to really invest in the equipment, which we've seen. Third Space, as I think the numbers have tripled in the last 2 years, despite the pandemic. It's incredible, some of the work they're doing with their fermenters over there. But you're right. Everyone's got to put out a good product, and everyone's got to, even if you have your niche, you also got to kind of appeal to the masses. I mean, we've certainly seen over the last year the hard seltzer craze, and is that beer? Is that not beer? That could be a whole podcast discussion. But you saw a lot of those brewers too doing that, so that you can bring, you know, the whole family, and maybe a wife or a sister doesn't want to drink a beer, go to the hard seltzer route, or go to those fruited sours that, you know, taste like you're drinking a smoothie. Really kind of find that overall appeal.
Margaret, you kind of touched on this, but you know, again, in your experience and as you're visiting different microbreweries and such, do you see any gaps in the market? Like, boy, there is, you know, out in Colorado, they are really doing a lot of this, or, you know, down in Chicago, they're really doing a lot of this. Question. We still haven't hit that yet, but that's a huge opportunity for somebody who's getting into the space. Are there any blind spots that Milwaukee's missing?
That's a really good question, and certainly, like I said, we are maybe a step or two behind some of the more developed craft brewery towns, the Denvers, the Chicagos. Being a woman, I think something that's always interested me is minority groups, whether it's women, whether it's BIPOC, Black, Indigenous person of color. I think that's something that Milwaukee maybe is kind of a little bit behind and start, but I behind with intentions to grow, intentions to build. You see in
Great
some
point.
of the you see in some of the big craft brewery areas, whether it's the beer they produce and a beer that goes towards mental health awareness. That's the latest one. We had a Black is Beautiful to go to the Black Lives Matter movement. You have the beers itself, and that certainly is a unique thing that we haven't seen in the past. The beer, the can of beer you're picking up off the shelf, going to bigger causes, but also certainly the craft brewing industry is male dominated and often times white male dominated. And so we're starting to see more and more brewing organizations, associations develop that encourage people, whether you're Black, whether you're a woman, to get involved in the industry. I know here, that's why I want to say, while we're behind, we are certainly building. I know MobCraft does a great program. I think they're still doing it. They were doing it every week during the heart of the pandemic. It may have trickled to a few times a month now, but they're doing a program where they talk to people that maybe are not well known in the industry, but have these passion projects and maybe aren't the people you're used to seeing behind the bar counter or within the brewing system area. So I think that's a really unique one. Certainly, trends. That's a little bit trickier one because as soon as one trend is kind of up and growing, then the Denver's, the Chicagos, they're already looking for next year. So I kind of joke that as soon as we start talking about one, it's going to be old news. So last year, it was the smoothies, it was those heavy IPAs where it was, it tastes like a cheesecake, tastes like like that. And now we're kind of shifting a little bit more of the New England style IPAs. We're seeing some of this spontaneous fermentation sour ales that actually taste sour. Not that overly fruited. So every time we talk a trend, a new one's coming up, it seems like right around the corner.
Margaret, the city got built upon a reputation of, mass breweries, right? And we all know the history of that. And, certainly the trend is toward more of the micro, right? More of the just different types of flavors, experimentation. And I think this is my personal opinion, is the macro breweries have grown as big as they're going to get. They're really kind of tapped out, certainly here within in the States. So do you see, from the Miller Coors type of thing, is any part of their plan to just say, great, we are going to start poaching the fronts, the third spaces, that's where we're going to get growth, and just let them run themselves, as opposed to trying to do it on their own or some other thing? What are you hearing from the big boys?
Yeah, well, that's such an interesting question because Molson Coors and certainly Miller, they're formal name now, Molson Coors Beverage Company. That one is a new one to get used to for all of us in the industry. They have done a lot through the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, when their new CEO Gavin Hattersley came in. That was a big first move. We're not Molson Coors. We're not a beer company. We are a beverage company, and from there. A lot of changes, certainly throughout the company, but a lot of changes Milwaukee. And so that's where we kind of tie it back to the city. Molson Coors is certainly doing a lot more partnerships, as you see now, and that's been a lot of my coverage lately. So when you talk about kind of poaching the third spaces, the Eagle Parks, those type, I'm not sure they're quite doing that, but they are certainly working a lot more in tandem. It's not just focused on their Miller and Coors Light, which are still going to be their big sellers. That's not going away, even if we add beverage to the name. Still well known for their beer, still have that reputation. But now they're working with partnerships, whether it's hard seltzers, whether it's wine coolers, whether it's in Canada, they have a new CBD venture that they're also starting to expand into Denver. They're seeing other segments that they can play in the market and certainly use the power of these craft companies, whether it's craft brewer, whether it's a craft seltzer or wine distributor. So it's kind of it's a tandem partnership. The smaller guys get the reputation, the distribution network, the marketing tools behind Molson, but then Molson Coors gets something that's a little different than the Coors or the Miller that you're going to pick up at any store shelf. Certainly the economically friendly brands, but the craft beer side of Molson Coors company is one it's fun to follow. I mean, even here in the state, Leinenkugel's people don't quite realize, but it's incorporated into Molson Coors, and they've been able to leverage that, certainly with Summer Shandy being the top dog for Leinenkugel's. But we've seen a lot of changes even with them, with putting Spritzens, where it's seltzer beers or the Radler combinations, and kind of finding what different marketing tools will work well with their platform as well. When you have a big name like Molson Coors, you can get in the Christian Yelich to get online with Dick Leinenkugel, have an Instagram live session. That's kind of the power of having big name marketing with Molson.
Yeah. Margaret, I guess I have a question of, we call it the crystal ball, looking ahead to the future a little bit. And I'm not necessarily saying like what types of beers do you see out there in the future, what's going to be happening in tap rooms. I'm looking at a higher level of, can Milwaukee continue to grow in the craft brewery market and the spirits market? Will it plateau? Do you see any major trends that might be coming down the line where people that are in the business can go, okay, good point. Maybe we should look at this. What's happening in the future?
Sure. I mean, when you look at even national statistics that kind of show where we're at in comparison, we still probably have a couple more years of growing, which I know sounds surprising when we talk about just how many brewers out there. But I think a good way to reflect on that has been the pandemic. And despite the challenges the pandemic brought, we saw, 4 or 5 different new breweries already launching or in the works. So I think we have a few more years, but you're right. At some point, you do plateau, at least on the craft beer side. At some point, we're going to reach our point where maybe we have to look to other ways to grow our craft beer industry, where it's not adding new brewers, but the development breweries themselves. I think you're already starting to see that for some of the breweries that have been around for a few more years. We saw Sprecher went through new ownership, and that's, a name that we know very well here in Milwaukee. And they've got big goals as far as, really taking their beers nationally, starting regional, pushing to national, their craft soda. I recently talked with their CEO and was pleasantly surprised to hear that their kind of third line of their operation is a sugar base, malt sugar base for, what is it? Hard seltzers. I keep bringing it back. As much as I'm not a hard seltzer fan as much, I tend to go more the traditional beer route. It is a big thing to see. So I think you're going to see these brewers look for different ways to innovate within the industry, maybe look for different ways to expand and distribute. Eagle Park's a great example. I want to say they started 2013 or 2014. We're at 2021 now, and they're two locations. Muskego, they've got the distillery as well, so they look to push their boundaries there. They just won an award for their vodka, so I think you're going to see more. Maybe Molson Coors had the right idea on the macro level. Maybe we'll see the same on the micro level, where you're going to have to look at all alcoholic beverages, not just the beer side of things.
Yeah, what's interesting when you're saying how, I think you're right. Like any business, when we're talking craft breweries here, they're going to have just to continue to be innovative and think differently. And not that it's a new concept, but I even noticed like last year, it was kind of cool how Third Space and Working Draft out of Madison would kind of play together, or maybe it was the Gathering. But they would offer their lot up on a Friday where Working Draft could come down to Milwaukee and, sell their beer on the Third Space lot or at the Gathering. Which I think is kind of cool. So it's almost like that sister city concept where, there's a couple breweries who are identifying another one that maybe there's some synergies. And I think that's kind of neat. From a neighborhood perspective and from a marketing perspective, you talked about, hey, there's pockets, you've got the Bayviews, the Wauwatosa's, and in a sense, it's almost like it's mini tourism. They're all kind of like, fighting for that reason for someone to come there and visit. What is one of the more unique things outside of the expected, I guess, like a unique thing that you saw a neighborhood brewery do to really try to take ownership of that backyard, whether it was Brewing in River West. You know, you know what, we have to do something really cool, really unique, really different to make sure that at a minimum we're like just keeping the name alive, and we're making sure that River West people are coming to our brewery. What are a few things you saw that were really just like, wow, that's cool, that's a great idea?
Sure. I mean, and certainly breweries have gotten creative, not just last year, but last couple years with that. You mentioned River West, and the first thing that came to mind is they did a River West, I think it's a River West Syndicate. I don't remember the full name, but they basically did a co-op with all their breweries. I was over at Black Husky for the launch of that, where you take the power of a couple different, and the unique thing about Milwaukee, we talk a lot about the small Milwaukee, that concept that goes throughout all of tourism, and I think it's so apparent in the craft beer industry because behind the scenes, we don't see it as the customers, but breweries are doing so much unique things when it comes to barring equipment, barring hops.
Interesting.
You're grabbing that. So that's behind the scenes. But then in the front, you have things like this co-op, this syndicate. I mentioned the Lincoln Park warehouse, and that's something I definitely want to do a kind of more in-depth study on. That specific building in Bayview, right now you have 2 different breweries in there. The Eagle Park has been in there before. I think Company has been in there. You have this one space that somehow has been able to transform breweries and kind of build the next stepping stone. That's a unique way, I think, to drive people to area when you have a couple in one area, in one building in this case. I'm trying to think of others. I mean, I think Stockhouse has been interesting recently they just went under new ownership and are really trying to actually transform. They started off as we're only going to brew a beer once. Unique concept, but gosh, what if you find a beer that you love there, and then, maybe you'll get something similar, a similar hop variety or a different fruited adjuncts to put in, but they said no, we want to stay as this local neighborhood scene. They've got a great patio right off of North Avenue as well, and so they said no, we are actually going to do a lot more customer reaching out to our customers. So if you like a beer, tell us, we're going to brew it again. It might not be next couple of weeks, it might be a seasonal rotation, but they're actually building their flagship right now. That's another one that comes to mind, is really involved in the community. Certainly Black Husky. Right now, as we're going through the chaos of COVID, what better way to draw people into your neighborhood than free beer, and kind of link it back to these public health initiatives we have going on right now in the city in different ways. Certainly a lot of creativity and a lot of partnerships. I think that's the biggest thing going on. We could talk all proprietorship, mouthful there, and just the fact that you're seeing sometimes now Mobcraft is a great example where they're gonna work with other breweries. That's the behind the scenes aspect. Use our brewing equipment. We'll get a partnership there. But then one Saturday a month, you're gonna see the Rookery. You're gonna see Radix. You're gonna see Supermoon. You'll see a couple of these on tap, and they're gonna actually have a presence within Mobcraft. So these small breweries are doing passion projects. Still have their name, still have a little recognition, but also have, again, the tools of a bigger brewery. In this case, Mobcraft has established itself for a few years. And draw people into, in this case, the Walker's Point area. So it's all about getting people into a certain part of town.
Hey, Margaret, you had mentioned that Milwaukee's behind sometimes in various industries. We've seen it in a lot of different industries. But where does Milwaukee stack up now with craft brewing compared to other similar sized cities? And I know you probably don't get a chance to travel to all of them, but I mean, where do you think we rank? Are we in the top? Are we in the bottom? Are we, slowing down? Where do you think Milwaukee falls in overall across the country?
Sure. I don't think we're in that top tier quite yet. I think we still have ways to go. As far as, like I said, not even necessarily the number of breweries. We're certainly seeing quite a large number, but the quality. And quality takes a few years to build, certainly. Yeah. I think we're seeing it in certain ones. That the era, I mentioned Eagle, Third Space, a lot of those opened around the same time. And they're hitting kind of their peak point right now, where statewide distribution, high quality products. Not that the newer ones are not producing high quality, but I think you need a few years to get into the market. Figure out what is your niche, figure out what works well, what doesn't, maybe get the brewing equipment you need, and Milwaukee is great with that. We have a couple different brewing system manufacturers right here in the city developed. So I think you're seeing we're maybe like one step low. We're not in the top tier. We're getting there though. I think you're gonna some of these larger, not macro, but larger of the craft breweries really kind of hitting their stride in the next year or so.
Okay.
Hey, Margaret, my last question for you is one brewery that I'm just dying to get your take on, where they're going, what you're seeing from them, any kind of thing you could tell us is New Glarus, right? I get so many people from out of town going, hey, I got some spotted cow, I'm taking it back home, or that brewery really seems to have put a mark and has opened the door for a lot of other players within the not only Milwaukee but the state, right? Give us your take on that, if you could.
Oh my goodness, yeah, New Glarus. It's not in my general coverage area, so I don't get a chance as much to cover them. But that does not mean I don't hear about New Glarus all the time. Like you said, well known in the state, well known outside the state. I think the thing that's so unique about New Glarus is the fact we have the Leinenkugels, which I think at some point you could have said they were on the same level, but then Leinenkugels got bought. Taken into Molson Coors. The fact that New Glarus is still independently owned and still has such attraction and still only selling within the state. I know I've lived outside of Wisconsin for a while, and that you joke you're gonna sneak your New Glarus out across the border.
Yep.
So the fact that it can be such a reputable, so well known, and so nationally recognized in a lot of these kind of national beer competitions, you see this, and yet still focus specifically on the state. I think that's something that maybe some of the other brewers, Third Space, for example, I know they just went statewide. Not sure what their plans are yet for going more regional, but I think some of these Milwaukee breweries that are reaching that next level, that next kind of step in their growth, should maybe watch for. And certainly you have Spotted Cow, but New Glarus is also well known for its different craft beer seasonal lines throughout the year as well. So not something I get to focus on as much as maybe I'd like to, but certainly some brewery to kind of maybe be modeled after for some of these Milwaukee brewers.
Margaret, this has been awesome. We want to be cognizant of your time. I know you got 1,000,001 things going on. You're up your eyeballs and I'm sure 1,000 deadlines. So, hey, thank you so much for coming in and talking beer. This is going to be part of a series that we're doing throughout the month of May, where we're just focused all on the beer industry, talking to different people, getting different perspectives on something that's, like you said, it's really important to this region of the state, and it's growing. And so, Margaret, thanks so much. And please, let's make some time for you to come back. I'd love to talk to you about some of the other beats that you cover.
Oh yeah, I keep saying brewers, and in my head I'm going, wait, are we talking beer? Or are we talking about baseball? What is it? I'd love to come back. It was so fun chatting, and I it's getting close to 5 o'clock. I'm ready to crack open my beer and enjoy the rest of the night. But
cheers.
We're talking. Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret. Cheers to you.
Cheers.